Okay, so this is part 2 on the 1950s in science fiction. Again, at the end of this 3-part presentation, you should be understanding the history and the influences that inspired the stories we're about to read. So I mentioned yesterday that we'd talk a little bit about communism and why it was considered to be so bad and how they used propaganda to basically start kind of like a witch hunt within our own country. So hopefully you remember from last year that communism is a type of government where people are supposed to be equal, and the government holds all the property and money and distributes things evenly, so there's no poor versus rich. That's the ideal situation. However, most of the time we see governments that have greedy individuals or individuals that end up keeping more money than they distribute to others. So instead of it being an even distribution, you definitely have some that have more versus some that have less. So in this instance, after World War II, Russia became a communist country and was considered the new enemy of the United States. Both Russia and the United States fought in World War II side by side and helped defeat the Germans. However, after World War II, we both were considered a new superpower, and we decided to look at Russia as an enemy instead of a friend, specifically because they were communists. And what I would like for you to do is to go ahead and pause this video specifically and go back to Edmodo and watch the video I have attached to tonight's homework link called National Security in the 1950s. And as soon as you're done with that, come back to me and we'll continue this video. So as we've already talked about, the government was really good at using propaganda to convince the American people that communism was bad and we didn't want it here in our country, and we would go so far as to start wars. We started the Korean War, and that was part of the reason we went into Vietnam, and we started the Cold War with Russia. Now, the Cold War was different than Vietnam or the Korean War in that there wasn't actually any fighting or death that occurred, but it was an arms race, which both of the videos, I believe, discuss and talk about as far as nuclear power and who had the best ammunition and who had the best weapons, and it was definitely a fight against Russia to see who would win. And we started fearing communist spies within our own country, and we started kind of pitting neighbors against neighbors, going back to the theme that we talked about in the first video of everybody being the same and everybody watching their neighbor. And if the Joneses down the street got a TV, you wanted a TV. If they got a car, you got a car. Everybody wanted to be the same as everybody else, because if you weren't the same, you stuck out as being different. And with the propaganda of the time period about communism, one of the biggest pieces was, if you were different, if you didn't think the same way everybody else did, oh, you must be a communist spy, you must be a commie. And that became a very bad word. You didn't want to be called that. You didn't want to be thought of as being communist during that time period, because odds are you might have been hauled off to jail, you would have been questioned, you could have been even blacklisted. So this time period became almost like a modern day Salem witch trial, where you were accusing people, innocent people. Most of the time they were innocent people. So you're accusing innocent friends and neighbors of being communist spies, and then horrible things would befall them. They'd be taken to jail and questioned. They could lose their job. They could have any number of things happen to them. And over the years, I found out that a lot of people don't know what I talk about when I'm mentioning the Salem witch trials. So if that's true and you don't know anything about the Salem witch trials, if anyone wants to go to YouTube and do a search and see if they can find some interesting video or a short little clip that explains what the Salem witch trials were, and you want to post that on Edmodo, that would be great. I would love your help in that area. So if you want to see what the Salem witch trials is, and I'm making a reference to that and you have no idea what I'm talking about, help us out and see if you can't find a video so that people can be enlightened on the topic. But basically, it was just a simple situation where people were pointing fingers and saying that someone was communist when they weren't, and basically causing a lot of issues with people. There was one particular senator that really ran this as this sort of like crazy rampage, and he was known, Senator McCarthy was his name, and I believe he's talked about in the video I'm going to ask you to watch today. And he basically was using these trials, the McCarthy trials, as a way for his name to get out there, because he wanted to run for president eventually. And he was hoping that by solving the communist problem in America, it would get him votes and get him elected as president. The problem was, again, many of the people that were being called on were. So what I'd like for you guys to go ahead and do now is to pause the video and go back to Edmodo and watch the second video I posted called Birth of the Cold War. When you're done with that, come back and we'll finish up the video here. So at this point, you're finished with your whisk, and I want you to remember to go back and do your summary and question. Summary expectations, I need 3 sentences with the topic and a few details. And don't forget to make your questions hot, those higher order thinking questions. Refer back to your journal for your question starters if you can't remember. And I will see you in class tomorrow. Thanks.